Hey guys, welcome back to another first impressions video. I've been lucky enough to be able to get my hands on the new Shimano 25 Stellar SWD in a 14,000 XG size. This reel is absolutely jam-packed with a ton of new features. So we're going to be going through a variety of things today, from the cosmetics to the actual technologies that make such a big difference with this brand new upgrade. The 25 Stellar SWD is going to be available mid this year, 2025, in 3 different sizes. So it's going to be the 10,000 in the power gear, 10,000 in the high gear, and a 14,000 in the extra high gear. All of these 3 models will be priced at $1,849, which makes it the most expensive reel on the market from a major reel brand. Is it worth the price? Let's check it out. Let's get started with the cosmetics. So what's immediately noticeable is that the 25 Stellar has this gunmetal top of the spool, as opposed to the 2019/2020 Stellar, which has this standard black at the top of the spool. So on top of that, you'll notice that the drag knob on that new Stellar has gotten a little bit larger. I believe it's gotten about 25% larger, which we'll go through later in the video. However, there's a lot of reasons for this, including making it more ergonomic and easier to turn that drag knob. And I think that's a very welcome change. Another thing that you notice right away is that the bail wire has a different color also. So it went from like a chrome silver type steel color to a brand new, almost blackish, but a very dark gunmetal gray color. Although it's not an absolute game changer, I do think that it adds a little bit of charm and appeal. And also it's just very consistent with the overall look of the reel. So the new 25 Stellar also has a brand new colored mainframe. So that mainframe and rotor have gone from a more darker, almost black type color to a gunmetal gray color, not quite as light as that top of the spool, but somewhere kind of in between that and the previous model. It's almost as though they tried to make this 25 Stellar a little bit brighter than the previous model. And I think that it actually looks a little bit nicer in my opinion. Another thing that you'll notice are the cuts in the spool have slightly changed. So the previous ones were more of a smaller cut at about maybe 45 degrees. The newer ones come in at about like a 30-degree type angle, and they're a lot longer. Honestly speaking, I don't think that has much of a functionality component to it. However, cosmetically, it is always nice to have a little bit of a change. So I guess a lot of this will be up to your personal opinion and what your preference is. Finally, another thing that I noticed was the rear protector, or the bash plate. The ventilation in that bash plate has changed slightly. They've gotten a bit smaller in the new model, so I'm not sure if that's speaking of Shimano's, I guess, confidence in their ability for this to dissipate heat better. But it's definitely an interesting change, because the smaller that ventilation hole, I find the less salt buildup you'll get within the reel. So if they are really changing that due to that heat dissipation, I think that it's saying a lot about their confidence with their product. And that's obviously a very positive thing, especially at that crazy price point of $1,849. But these little things do start to justify the price of why a reel of this caliber will be priced at such a high price point. A bit of a small one that's not really a cosmetic change, but a bit of a feel change, is the actual handle knob itself. The previous models had a bit more of a, I guess, textured feel, right? Whereas this new one has a much more of like a slick, smoother, grippy rubber type feel. So I'm not sure if that makes much of a difference while actually fishing. However, I guess it would provide more grip. So if any of you anglers have had issues with slippages while holding the handle, this potentially can address that issue. Although I think if you wear gloves, it makes barely any difference, if any difference at all. Okay, so now we're moving on to the brand new technologies that they've input into these reels. And honestly, cosmetically speaking, they've kept that same design philosophy. So it doesn't look all that different apart from the slight color differences and whatnot. However, when it comes to the technology, they've honestly injected so much new tech into this that it's actually very impressive how they've managed to do that. So let's go through them. The first big feature we're going to talk about is an anti-twist fin, which goes right under that line roller there. So this anti-twist fin feature is really cool because it minimizes the line slack that you have while winding the line. This prevents that line from getting caught underneath your spool, which was a potential issue that you may have had with other reels in the past. However, this Stella has essentially mitigated that problem. And what else they've done to actually completely get rid of that issue is that spool design here, where now it's a lot more rounded off. And what that does is it means that any line that gets caught along the top of the spool will actually slide right off with a nice smooth design. So your line will pretty much always be sitting within that spool area there, which is exactly what you want for your line management. Another really cool part of the anti-twist fin is that it's actually made out of an elastic material. So for all of you guys who are running, say, big PR knots or big FG knots for your larger fish, you're gonna find that sometimes you'll need to use a very long leader. And for you guys using a really long leader, that elastic anti-twist fin actually reduces the amount of damage that occurs to your knot when it runs through that area, because it's essentially able to pass through the anti-twist fin with minimal to no friction because of its elastic nature. The next amazing feature that Shimano has implemented, which I think is an absolute game changer, is the Infinity Loop, otherwise called the slow oscillation system. So essentially what this Infinity Loop or slow oscillation does is that it helps that spool oscillate at a slower pace than it was before. This produces an absolutely immaculate line lay. And if you guys have seen videos of people spooling, say, a 22 Stella, the new Twin Powers, obviously this new Stella now, they all feature that slow oscillation, and that line lay is absolutely amazing. It's got a lot of benefits that come from that. It's not just an aesthetic thing. The actual practical advantages that come from this is that it significantly reduces the resistance on the line when the drag's getting pulled out, because it minimizes those high and low points of when that line comes out of that spool to that line roller right there. So it minimizes that kind of harsh angle that you'll have there. So that gives you a much more consistent and smooth drag performance. On top of that, having that nice and neat line lay will give you that optimized casting performance you can get from a reel. Another cool little thing with the slow oscillation is that this Stella SWD actually has a slow oscillation which goes at 2 different speeds. So it's faster on the way up and slower on the way down. That creates a bit of a crossing of the line on the way up to on the way down. So what that means is when you're onto something really big and you're getting your drag pulled, say at like a 10, 15, 20 kilo drag capacity, that line's not going to dig in on itself because it's actually crossing over and preventing that line dig. That's going to be really important for you guys chasing your GTs, your big kings, your tuna, your marlin. For any of those really, really hard fighting species, which are just considered the absolute ultimate trophy fish, you're going to want to have this feature when you're fighting that fish. And the last thing about this, and you can probably tell that I really love this feature, but the last thing is when drag is peeling off your reel, that drag peeling is kind of sending vibrations through the rod, right? So having that really neat line lay actually creates a lot less shuddering or kind of shaking of the rod. So it goes from a very erratic shaking action from your regular reels to like a very smooth, controlled pulsing action, which gives you a lot more control over that fish. Plus it has the ability to give you that little edge to make sure that you don't pull hooks. So moving on to the third feature, which is the XX Tough Drag. To put this really simply, the previous Stella ran carbon washers, so does the new one. But what they've done is they've added another carbon washer to the top of the spool. So now these carbon drag washers are almost sandwiching that spool down. So what this will achieve is that it'll give you a more powerful drag, a more consistent drag, and provides better heat dissipation. This feature, on top of the heatsink technology that was available in the previous models, is going to give you the ultimate drag performance and heat dissipation from this reel. Maybe that has something to do with the cuts in the spool, the heat dissipation, but that one I can't confirm. The fourth feature, Infinity Drive, is what makes this Stella so smooth. So they use a low friction bushing on the top and the bottom of the pinion gear to allow for that main shaft to run through very smoothly when it's oscillating up and down. On top of Shimano's proprietary low friction coating on that main shaft, gives it a very, very smooth oscillation. So what that does is it reduces the inertia and the startup of the reel, which makes it wind just so easily. It barely needs a touch to start moving. And that's essentially what makes this Stella so smooth to wind. Beautiful, isn't it? The fifth technology is the Infinity Cross. So the Infinity Cross has to do with the main gear set of the Stella. You can call it the heart of the reel. So what this Infinity Cross does is it gets a pinion gear and the drive gear and it maximizes that surface contact. So when you maximize the surface contact on a reel, it means that you're able to get more torque and more power out of the reel, because essentially it's making more contact with each other. So it gives you more room to spread that pressure of you winding and winching that reel, and it converts that pressure into almost a perpendicular angle to get that rotor to turn. This immediately makes the reel so much more powerful, but on top of that, the way that they've achieved it is by getting the gear teeth to be about 50% larger or wider, which means that the torque and durability of the gears have been significantly increased. So you can expect a longer life out of this 25 Stellar as opposed to any previous generation. The last feature we'll be going through today is your X-Protect and X-Shield. These features are what make these Stellars so waterproof. It's a series of rubber seals located in multiple areas, pretty much everywhere in the reel, including the drag knob, top and bottom of the rotor, the line roller, there's two. On the handle, or the handle knob rather, there's one at the bottom, one at the top. The mainframe itself has a large rubber seal or large rubber gasket going around the mainframe where the side plate meets. There's another rubber seal where the rotor meets the mainframe as well. There's a rubber gasket underneath the rear protector. I think you get the point. There's a lot of these rubber gaskets in the areas where water can be prone to getting in. This helps make this reel extremely water resistant. In certain areas, it's actually rated at IPX8. However, as a whole, I wouldn't say that it's a completely waterproof reel. I personally don't believe that there's any 100% waterproof reel. The one exception may be Van Staal, which I've never tested, never tried, so I can't really comment too much on that. However, I think that the waterproofing on the 25 Stellar is the best that the market has available, on par with the 25 Saltigas Mag Seal. So both of these reels shouldn't give you any troubles with water intrusion unless they're put through very unexpected circumstances. Overall, this 25 Stellar SWD is an absolutely amazing reel that's been jam-packed with so many features, and it's almost deceptive because that design philosophy is very similar to the previous model. However, so much new tech has been added into this reel, which essentially transforms it into a whole different beast. So this 25 Stellar costs 20% more than a 25 Saltiga in the equivalent size. Is it worth the $1,849? Does this mean that it's a better reel? Is it 20% better? Is it better at all? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Hope you enjoyed the video, and thank you very much for watching. I'll see you next time.